Hello, everyone. This is the third session in March for the DBA Fundamentals virtual chapter. We are going to be speaking today, well, actually, we're going to be listening to Brian Carrig speak on administering beyond the speed of light, managing SQL Server with Ansible. Let me make my thing here. Before we begin, I have a little bit of housekeeping. First things are first, our sponsors. Without our sponsors, we wouldn't be able to provide all of the great content we do. SQL Sentry is our primary sponsor. They help you build, test, document, and monitor all of SQL Server, Azure, and the Microsoft Data Platform. You can reach them online, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, right here below. They also have a lot of stuff on their, a lot of information on their website. So they have SQLperformance.com, as well as blogs by their coworkers and such. And they have a helpful resources page, which has a lot of links to a lot of different things. So rather than listing a whole bunch in here, you can just go to their helpful resources page at century1.com/resources, and it's a one-stop shop with a whole lot of links for you. They also offer free query tuning advice and several downloads. You can get a trial of their software, as well as a wonderful Plan Explorer product, which is actually a plugin for your Management Studio window, and it really gives you a good idea of the query plans, better than what SMS does out of the box. The next sponsor we have is DB Watch. And the product that DB Watch, sorry, goodness gracious, the product they have is a complete solution for database administration, monitoring, performance tuning, security, and license management. So it's a complete package. It's scalable and efficient for tuning and management of SQL Server, Oracle, and other platforms. You can also get them online. The website and Twitter are here for you. They also have a blog that you can actually get to, and downloads of their software as well. So please check them both out and let them know we sent you. Whoops, let me go back a slide here. If I can. There we go. We are a member of, my laptop's a little bit crazy, going crazy today. We are a member of PASS. And so we wanted to point out all of the other virtual groups that are available for you. We are the DBA Fundamentals virtual group. There's also application development, BI, different languages, professional development, PowerShell. There's a lot. So please make sure you go to pass.org and check them out. And they all have sessions. We do have three a month. I don't think most do as much as we do. Pat on our back here, but they all have wonderful, wonderful speakers, so, and great topics. Here are a lineup of the upcoming sessions that you'll see. Professional development, there's an Italian, DevOps, Hebrew, Cloud, and then we're back again here early April. And there's more than this. This is just the most recent in the next few days for you. Went through that one too fast too. SQL Saturdays are an event that PASS helps sponsor, and they are global, so definitely check out near you and see what's coming near you. SQL Saturday is actually a full day of training that's absolutely free, except for maybe lunch, and they all do things a little differently for lunch, but you can go to SQLSaturday.com and check out the entire lineup. But here's the list of the upcoming. So in US and Canada, there's Victoria, Chicago, Tampa. I'm going to be going to that one on Saturday. Richmond, Cincinnati, Boston, they are literally everywhere. I know that when I first went, it was like a kid in a candy shop, and I can still, remember that feeling. It was a great networking opportunity, and I've met a lot of friends from that. So definitely check it out. Also, if you're wanting to be a speaker at any point in time, you can check out your local user groups and such. But SQL Saturdays are a great way of stepping up into speaking as well. Another event that PASS puts on is the PASS Summit. It happens once a year. This year, it's going to be the 5th through the 9th in November. If you are wanting to get in and get a price, they do bump the price up every couple of months or so. So make sure you get in as early as you can. Also, we have a discount code, which is the big green, big bold letters for you. If you use that discount code, you get $150 off. So right now, as of now, the discounted price is $16.49. I believe it goes up either April or May, probably April. So it'll bump up and then it'll bump up, I think, a couple more times before it happens. So get in as early as you can just to get the best prices. It's also a wonderful event. It's not a free one, but it brings people from all over the world into one place, as well as Microsoft and all of the, I believe there's the SQL Cat team and things like that. So definitely, definitely something to look forward to and learn, and it's just wonderful. You can also do karaoke after hours with a whole bunch of SQL people. And what's better than that? Our virtual chapter news, we actually have picked the winners for the January and February attendance for the gift cards. The March is going to include attendance, as well as for everybody who uses the discount code, one of those would be picked for a $300 gift card. So if you're going to get in, again, get in as early as you can, use the discount code, and it'll be a small drawing, but one person will win a $300 gift card to go along with them on their trip. Make sure you watch us on Twitter and email. Make sure you're on our subscription list, and you will actually pick up the next giveaways for who won, as well as April, May, and June. So make sure you're looking at that. Lastly, our sessions are recorded and will be available within a day or two. So this session here, you'll be able to check out on dbafuntube.org within a couple of days. With that, Brian, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Let me make you presenter, and then you'll be able to share your screen. There we go.
Okay, hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Thank you, Glenda, for the introduction. Okay, all right. So today I'm going to be talking about administering SQL Server using a product called Ansible. And Ansible is a configuration management and orchestration tool it's open source, and it is owned by Red Hat, or promoted by Red Hat. Okay, let's see. There we go. Okay, first off, who am I? So my name is Brian Carrig, and I have worked a number of roles as a DBA manager. I've worked as a site reliability engineering manager, and currently I work as a program manager for the Microsoft SQL Server Tiger team. And I've been working with SQL Server for almost 10 years now, which when you're working on the Microsoft SQL Server Tiger team makes you something of a newbie to the SQL Server world. We have people who've been working with SQL Server for 15, even 20 years. I'm a Microsoft Certified Master, and in case you can't tell by my accent, which hopefully isn't too strong, I'm originally from Dublin, Ireland, and currently living in Redmond, Washington, which is where Microsoft is based. And in a previous life, I worked as an academic, and I have a PhD in distributed computing. I highly recommend reading it if you're having my thesis, if you're having some trouble sleeping at night. It's a good 350 pages about distributed computing. Okay, so today, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about Ansible. This is very much an introduction to what Ansible is and what it does, and why you might want to consider it for use with SQL Server. And I should say, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat window, and I will take regular pauses to answer questions, and we can operate that way. No need to wait until the end or save them until the end, although I will try and leave some time as well at the end for questions. And as well, we can follow up offline uh, if anybody has any more detailed questions. So we'll cover some of the use cases for Ansible and SQL Server, and just Ansible generally. This talk is mainly geared as an introduction to Ansible. We'll cover the architecture for Ansible, how we use it for configuration management, step through a demo, and then, as I said, I'll try and leave some time and space for questions at the end. Okay, so first off, what is Ansible? So Ansible is an open source configuration management tool, and it does a little bit more than that in terms of it can be used to help manage your inventory, and it can be used for orchestration and deployment. And it's very similar to products like Puppet, Chef, Salt, even PowerShell desired state configuration. And some of the questions may well be, and I have been asked this: why Ansible? Why not Puppet? Why not Chef? Why not Salt? Will PowerShell DSC do everything I need? And the answer to that is that I personally got into using Ansible because that was what was installed and was the standard when I worked at a particular organization. So it's quite possible that one of these other products meets your needs better. And I'm not here to say Ansible is absolutely the best product for this, or that you should always use it. It just happens to be that a product that I have got familiar with, and I'm sure many of these other products are uh, could fit your needs. And this is not a Ansible versus competing products type presentation. What it does provide, as I mentioned, is provisioning and automation capabilities alongside. So you can use it for configuration management and for automation itself. When in my previous role, just before I joined Microsoft, we use it frequently to manage SQL Server, and we were able to automate creating new SQL servers and also configuring availability groups for SQL servers. So in a case where if we had a node go bad in our availability groups, we could spin up a new node, join it to the availability group, and then just kill off the old one. So that whole concept, that DevOps concept of treating your servers like they are cattle rather than they are pets. So if they're sick, you just get a new one and kill off the old ones. Sounds cruel, but when it comes to managing large amounts of infrastructure, this is the only way to really make that scalable and keep your sanity as you're managing hundreds of SQL servers. So Ansible, unlike some competing products, Ansible can be used to manage both Linux and Windows using SSH or WinRM to connect to the remote servers and to run tasks. And you can use basically use a single machine to control and configure hundreds upon hundreds of nodes. And it does have typically, so I will say the most typical setup that you will be using is that you will have your Ansible server, and you will, for your tasks that you want to run, like say you have a farm of web servers and you want to make sure they're all running a particular version of Apache. You would typically use your Ansible server to hit your target servers and perform whatever tasks are necessary, whether it's upgrading the existing version of Apache or perhaps installing Apache if it's not there. And I'll talk a little bit more later on about how Ansible in its configuration is declarative as opposed to saying, do this, and then if this happens, do this. It's not procedural. It's, this is the state I want my machine to be in. Please make it that state. It's also agentless, and this can be a big deal for a lot of companies and a lot of environments. The fact that it's agentless can be a huge benefit, and it also again it can make it easier to introduce if you're trying to sell this internally. The fact that it's agentless can be a huge boon in that regard. And launched in 2013, and as I mentioned, it's purchased. It was purchased and is now owned by Red Hat in 2015. Since 2015, sorry. Okay, so some of the benefits of Ansible some of which we already touched on. It is agentless. So, and I say Ansible is really built around the idea of Python. It can use other scripts, uh, PowerShell, Ruby, whatever flavor of scripting, Shell, whatever flavor of scripting you like to use, it can use, but Python is the most typical. So as I say, if the target is reachable, it can then be configured using Ansible. And a key, absolutely central concept to using Ansible in your environment is the idea of it being idempotent. So you make the changes, as I mentioned, your configuration concept is going to be declarative. You're going to say what you want, and part of that is going to be that your approach is idempotent. So basically, back to our web server example, we've got hundreds of web servers. We want to make sure they're all on the exact same patch level of Apache. We want to be able to run our configuration tasks, uh, what they call playbooks. We want to be able to run our playbook against all of the servers and have, if they are the correct version and patch level of Apache that we want, we can run this. It's absolutely safe. It will do nothing. If we're perhaps a version behind, it will perform an upgrade, and if Apache is not installed at all, it will pull down the version we want and install it. So as I mentioned, declarative, so we specify the state we want our target machine to be in rather than the actions we want to perform. And this can take a little bit of time to wrap your head around, but once you really kind of internalize it, it's a really, really powerful concept. And I found myself, still not being an expert in Ansible, I found that the ramp up is quite minor. It's quite gradual. You can pull it down and start playing around with it and find yourself able to do configuration tasks like installing services or making configuration changes very quickly. So it's got a very small ramp up curve and very strong community support for Ansible, including, and I'll show this in towards the end, including Microsoft has scripts out there for managing and configuring SQL Server on GitHub, and there's what's called Ansible Galaxy, which is basically community contributed modules and playbooks for Ansible. Okay, so some of the use cases we have provisioning. So we can use Ansible to provision new servers, whether they're VMs, provision containers. It could be installing on bare metal. management configuration, which really helps us when we're trying to, if we have a large environment and we're trying to make sure that we don't have much in the way of configuration drift. This is a good way for us to be able to say at any point in time that everything is configured exactly as we want and we expect. Application deployment. In a previous role, this was Ansible was how new code got deployed to production. New web servers would get built with the new code, and that will become a template, and then they will be gradually deployed behind the web balancer, and that's how code rollouts went. So it can be used as part of a pipeline for continuous delivery. And again, in cases I've seen, it's sometimes coupled with Jenkins to do code rollouts, and also security and compliance, because it ties in with managing your inventory, and then also again making sure that things are configured how you want. And because it's declarative, if, for example, some rogue administrator, or let's assume non-malicious cases, but you get paged, you get up at 3 a.m. to fix an issue, you make the configuration change, the issue goes away, you make a mental note to yourself, hey, I'll make sure and deploy this change across everything, check in the code, I'll make sure I'll go back to bed and I'll do all of this tomorrow. Of course, by the time you get up tomorrow, other tasks get in your way, you forget all about it, and all of a sudden you have one or two servers that were manually configured, and they have a different configuration than is your golden template configuration, and is different than what you expect. Well, this is one of the advantages, because as I mentioned, it's declarative, so that change will get rolled back unless you put it through the proper pipeline. So that's, and it's also self-documenting. So again, when it comes to compliance, when it comes to showing and demonstrating what your configurations are to auditors, you basically have everything documented just by virtue of these. And again, I'll show this in a minute, of these YAML files that specify the configuration for the servers that you are managing. And then follows on from that Ansible does orchestration, because we can not only create scripts to document and cover our configuration, we can actually go out and deploy it. Okay, actually I'll take a quick pause here in case there's any questions.
Yes, Brian, there actually is one. Does Ansible itself have source control?
So sorry, it broke up a little bit there for me. You mentioned source control?
Yes.
Okay, so it is the question, how does it tie in with source control, or?
That is it.
Okay, yes. So Ansible very much ties in with source control. This would be the recommended best practice for how you would use Ansible, is that you would check into source control all of your configurations. And I'll cover the breakdown between modules, roles, and playbooks, but all of these should be in source control, so that at any point in time, you know what you're able to check your playbook. Your playbook is essentially tasks that you want performed, and you'll have a record, so you'll know, hey, this is the playbook that was applied to these servers, so that you know that the state that you specified that they should be in. So absolutely, it will be best practice to have this coupled with source control. And again, this is essentially infrastructure as code, and everything builds upon. And I probably should have mentioned this at the very start, but everything builds upon the idea of having all of this in source control. Now you can use Ansible for, ad hoc use cases. You can use it as a way to quickly run, commands across hundreds of servers and collate the results. But the most typical way to use it is that you have playbooks, and you have these playbooks in source control, and this is how you manage um, your configuration, and this is how you manage your infrastructure essentially. And this can be how you document your inventory as well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about static and dynamic inventory in Ansible in a little bit. Okay, so hopefully that answers that question.
It did, Brian. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you. So this is our architecture for Ansible. So within the automation engine, we have, as I mentioned, inventory. We have our modules are essentially the core set of scripts that everything is built on. Ansible comes with an extensive amount of modules, particularly now. The latest stable version available is 2.7, and there's well over 1,000 modules available, covering all sorts of almost any facet of infrastructure that you would need to manage, public and private cloud, everything from as low down as managing network devices, right through to to managing aspects of public cloud, so and application deployment changes. So it's a whole stack level approach for you. And has an API, and then plugins, which I'm not going to delve into super deeply, but they're something of a glue that are globally accessible to all modules. I imagine it would custom modules. It's not very unusual to have to write for your own environment. Particularly, I would say, as we're looking at SQL Server and we're talking about managing SQL Server, um, uh, while things have improved, you may find that for your particular environment, you need to write your own custom modules, which sounds a lot scarier than it actually is. If you've ever written a PowerShell script to do something to multiple servers, this is essentially what you're doing, but it's very much reusable, and it's not like becomes a much easier way to manage, because you have a central repository of modules that say everybody in your team can use, as opposed to like, oh yeah, email me a copy of that script. So much more accountable, much more repeatable. So very much tying in with DevOps philosophy. And as I mentioned, so as we see at our users here, the users are going to be running playbooks, and then that's going to tie into inventory is basically used to compile a list of targets for your playbook, and then your playbook's tasks may call on particular modules. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, so inventory. So this is basically the nodes or servers that are accessible to your Ansible server. And this can just be a configuration file. If you have a very static environment, I've got a certain amount of servers to manage, it doesn't change very often, it might be perfectly acceptable to just have a static file, a file that lists the hosts that you want to manage. And this, this can be host names or IP addresses, and you can break them up even within your list. You can break them up into different categories that make sense for you and your environment. So you might have your web servers, your database servers, and so forth. You can use two different formats. You can use YAML or INI. Most typically, I see people using YAML, and actually, this might be very much a me thing. um, I, I've scripted a lot in PowerShell, and I've only really started to try and ramp up on Python in the last year or so. And so I'm getting used to this concept of white space mattering in your scripts. In YAML, white space very much matters, and if you are new to the world of YAML, do prepare yourself for occasionally running into fiddly issues with white space, and this is where a good IDE can help you with good plugins for YAML. I like Visual Studio Code, but obviously everybody's mileage may vary. And a really, really powerful thing for me, if you, particularly if you're using, if you're running in public cloud, and is this idea of dynamic inventory. And so a common way to approach this with Ansible is to use tagging, which you should be if you're running in a public cloud, regardless of what public cloud it is you tag your servers, and then you can use these tags to help you when you want to build a list of servers to target. So you might want to target, again, to use our Apache example, you want to target all of the web servers, and you've tagged your web servers as web servers, and hopefully you've targeted them as per environment as well. Although I would highly recommend having a different Ansible server per environment, locked down in such a way that it cannot target servers from another environment, so that you don't run into an issue where somebody, say, accidentally tries to upgrade something in test, but actually targets production. That's something you want to make impossible at a network level, as well as opposed to just relying on the diligence of your administrators to make sure that they say, hey, target this particular environment which I've tagged. So I'd highly recommend that as a best practice. And within the Ansible documentation, there are examples for how to use dynamic inventory with Azure, AWS, OpenStack, pretty much anything you can think of. And this is a great way if anybody has struggled with compliance in the public cloud, because one of the questions that auditors will frequently ask is, how do you delineate between different environments? How do you give me an inventory of all the servers that you manage? And for some places, this can be quite a large amount of work. Compiling, large environments. I got to compile a list of everything that I manage. With Ansible, this can become almost trivial if you do it right. You can say, uh, you can just query and say, hey, give me all of the web servers in the test environment. And especially if you have a high turnover rate, as I mentioned, I've worked in places where they use Ansible and they build templates with the latest version of code, promote them through the various environments, very similar. And in this case, they didn't use containers, but very similar to the concept of using containers for this. And So there was constant churn. You couldn't hope to keep up with this statically in a manual fashion, editing a file to say, you know, because they were constantly every day automatically adding and removing servers from behind a load balancer, creating new servers with new builds and new configurations. It was a constant churn in this continuous deployment type environment. But using dynamic inventory, we could always compile a list of all of the servers that we had in any particular environment performing any particular role. And that really saved a lot of time when it came to compliance. Okay, and you can combine multiple inventory servers. You might have a certain amount of static and some dynamic. You might have, perhaps you work in you have a hybrid environment where it's public and private cloud, or maybe multiple public clouds. This can be a great way to tie it all together. Okay, keep going. I'm assuming we've no questions at this point.
None as of yet.
All right. Okay, so here's a very simple example of a static inventory for, as you see, we can delineate. We can say these are web servers, these are database servers, and we have this undelineated mail server. So very, very simple, just a list of servers, and that's your static inventory. And dynamic basically builds the same, it just builds it on the fly by going somewhere and pulling it in. Okay, so key concept to Ansible. When you're starting out with Ansible, this is the thing you need to get familiar with first and foremost. You're not really going to, unless you have a very particular use case, you're not really going to be jumping in and immediately trying to write your own custom modules. But what you will be doing is building your own playbooks, and you could, plenty of examples of playbooks out there. So you can take a playbook that's, close to what you need, and adapt it and tweak it to what you need for your own particular environment. As I mentioned, you will be working with YAML a lot. That there was certainly a learning curve for me getting comfortable with YAML, but that might just be me. Maybe other people are totally fine with it. Again, as I mentioned, personal bugbear. I struggle with the idea of white space really mattering for what a configuration file will do. As we covered as well, what you really this declarative idea, you're describing, here's the system state that I want. And then your Ansible server will go and make the necessary changes to reach that desired state. And you can put in there, debug statements so that you can see, as you're developing these, you can see, get a little bit more information than might be necessary. And also you can, and even just regularly just print out and store changes that are made. So it's not like this is a black box. It goes out and maybe it does something or it doesn't. You can make sure that you print all of the info as you go. And in some cases, they take this output every time these changes are made, and then automatically check that into source control as well, so that again you have to aid with compliance. You not only have your inventory always available for the exact inventory that you're managing, you have a description of your configuration and a way to prove that you can, this is consistent across your environment. And then you also in source control have a complete history of any changes that were applied. And again, for big complex environments, DBAs are spending more and more time really dealing with compliance issues. And this is not a situation that's the trend is definitely not that this is getting lighter and easier. The trend is that compliance is going to become a bigger and bigger part of any administrator's job, and I think especially for database administrators. So this is something that, you know, can really, really take a lot of the burden off of the DBA when it comes to handling compliance issues. Okay. So again, the idea is that any tasks that you have to perform on a regular basis become repeatable and, you know, reliable, whether it's upgrades, patching, whatever regular tasks you need to do, you're going to have, you know, consistent, the task will be consistently applied, and you'll have a good record of changes that were made as you went. As I said, simple. YAML is actually pretty simple to write. One of the kind of design philosophies for Ansible is, and one of the reasons they went with YAML is that they wanted it to be almost human readable. And we'll see that in a second. I'm aware we're kind of tight for time, but we'll see in a second that that very much you can read the YAML file and you should have a really good idea what's going on. This is not Perl, if anybody's familiar with that. Nothing is obfuscated. It is very much designed to be very human readable. And again, this helps with compliance when you're dealing with auditors. They can really see what's going on. And then playbooks, very intuitive. Playbooks are composed of plays, which themselves called individual tasks, and the tasks then call modules. And these can be custom modules that you've developed yourself, or any of the 1,000 or more bundled modules that come with Ansible. And there's really, because some of the bundle modules, they call out to the shell, whether it's Linux or Windows, you've almost no restrictions in what you need to do. So you can, you know, if you're stuck, if there's not an easy kind of like do X module already in existence, at the very least you can call out to the shell to do what you need to do. Okay. Okay. Apologies. I have an issue with my slides. I was supposed to have an example playbook here. Doesn't appear to be showing. I'm sorry about that, but I will show in the demo. I will show an example playbook. So modules, as I mentioned, we have there's over 1,000 core modules, and even more in what's called Ansible Galaxy. So these are community contributed modules. So obviously they don't come with the same range of testing and support if you're paying for support with Red Hat, because these are community contributed, but a lot of them are heavily used and very reliable. Plugins, then, as I mentioned, these are kind of core functionality. They're available to all modules, and they do things like, you know, caching lists of servers, or, you know, callback connections, filtering, lookups. Certainly in the initial phases, I imagine that you will not need to touch plugins. Modules, as we mentioned, they're called by tasks in the playbook. And when I say typically, I mean they really should. So that you want your modules to be reusable, standalone, and idempotent. And the idempotent is really key to how Ansible works. You have to be able to continually call the same module and not have it not be a problem. So if you're installing a service to a certain version, you want it so that you can continually, repeatedly call or target a server and run this, but it will only perform work if work needs to be performed. And you can write the modules in anything you want. You know, for managing Windows, most people will probably want to write PowerShell, and that's totally fine. Your modules can be in PowerShell, Ruby, Bash, Python, even Perl. There are some Perl modules out there, probably less and less popular nowadays. And yeah, so as you mentioned, no matter how often the operation is completed, we always want to make sure that the system is returned to the state that we have declared that we want. Okay, so yeah, and as I mentioned, there's lots of existing modules for copying files and uh, making sure that a service is running. That's the other thing, you know. You could have you could continually run your playbooks in an automated fashion to make sure that particular services are always running. And as we give an example here, we're checking that the service running locally, Apache is running and it's in the state that's started. Okay, so roles. This is a logical grouping of tasks into a single container. So whereas modules do things, roles are more around helping you to break up in a way that makes sense to you and your environment. So like we might have a role for web servers, which might be comprised of a number of playbooks that we use to configure web servers. Okay, so yeah, as I mentioned, yeah, so this is really about logical grouping of tasks, whereas modules are scripts that run and do actual things. Okay, so yeah, I guess I got mixed up in my slide deck. Here is an example playbook. Again, for Apache here, and the name, and as you can see, this is very human readable, very intuitive. If you need to walk someone through what things do, you know, we're saying we're targeting all of the hosts. This is you know, we're giving a name, install and start Apache. We put in our variables of the port, the maximum of clients, the remote user that we're going to use to do the configuration, and then our list of tasks, the installation. Uh, it's a little bit more advanced to get into in this kind of introductory slide deck, but the template that we see there, there's this, you can create Jinja2 files, and these are like templated configuration files that you can put in with certain logic, and that when it runs, it creates a configuration file from this Jinja2 file using some of the logic in there. Sounds a little bit confusing as I describe it, but for example, with SQL Server, we used to use it to configure tempdb, because one of the logical constructs we would have in there would be to check the server and see how many processor cores there were and create the number of tempdb files equivalent to the number of processor cores up to a maximum of 8. And we had similar logic in there for configuring maxstop for SQL Server. So we were able to run a configuration file the same configuration file, or basically the same playbook that we could run against all our SQL servers, and yet the configuration that it would apply could be dependent, have variables dependent on the size of the server itself. Okay, so hopefully that's pretty intuitive, but I'll take some questions if we have any questions.
I don't think there's any questions right now, Brian. But you
Okay.
can keep going ahead.
Okay, no problem. Keep going. All right. Another thing, and this is this is a paid product by Red Hat, but you can download a trial, and I believe it's free for configuring small environments. I believe it's free without support. And it's called Ansible Tower, and this is basically gives you a UI. It has a REST API as well, but it basically gives you a UI interface to help you set up and configure and manage your environment using Ansible. And then it's got all the features that you would expect, in that you can, lock it down for role-based access. So you can give maybe your release team has the ability to push buttons for deployment, but your administration team has the ability to, change configurations and playbooks and so on. And then you can centralize the logging and auditing and compliance of changes that are made. So that's not something I've worked with personally, but it can be useful for a lot of places, and it might be an easy way to get into using Ansible because of the fact that it has a GUI interface. Okay, so here's where I was going to show a demo on confession time. When I woke up this morning and checked, somehow my servers that I had Pacemaker configured on were deleted. So I think bearing in mind I just recently joined Microsoft here, I think I didn't tag them properly and they got deleted. We also have MVP Summit on right now, so things are pretty hectic. So people may well have been going through and pulling down stuff and setting up stuff for demos. So I'll apologize, and I'll just quickly show, and this is all available on GitHub in the Microsoft repo. It's basically an Ansible playbook for configuring and installing and configuring SQL Server on Linux with Pacemaker, which is what is used for high availability for availability groups for SQL on Linux. So we can see here we've got our modules here, which are Python scripts, which is core that we build on. And let me see. So hold on, we get to let's see if we can start. Yeah, so we got the way they've logically composed it in roles. We've got role for Pacemaker, we got one for SQL Server HA, and then the external components of the availability group around the resource agents and listener. And this is our inventory that we pull in. Very simple list of servers. And this is our playbook. As we can see, it pulls down the repo packages, set our endpoints, and I'd really encourage everyone to go through this. For anyone, particularly if you're an interest in SQL Server on Linux, and there's plenty of other examples in here as well within this Ansible playbook for Linux, and we've even got one for Kubernetes as well. If you're interested, and SQL Server 2019 has big data clusters, so we've got some playbooks in there for that. Sample deployment scripts. So there's a lot of goodies in here to get you started, get you playing around with. And let me see. So within our tasks for SQL Server, one of the things to be aware of when you're configuring this, in terms of the YAML files, main is always run, but you can also create additional files that can be conditionally run. And this is one for very straightforward configuring the Microsoft SQL Server, installing the repo, and as you can see, all very simple. These double curly brackets are how you specify variables in YAML. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see that, and then we can see the installation. So even just if, never mind configuring HA, but even if you just want to step through and install SQL Server on Linux, on either Ubuntu or Red Hat, this is an easy way to do it. And let me see, we're almost at time. Actually, yeah, that's not too bad. Okay. See. Apologies. There we go. Okay. To summarize, so Ansible is it's a simple configuration management solution that can be scaled up in such a way that it can perform very complex configuration tasks. And by design, the whole design philosophy to keep it very minimalist and have it be secure, consistent, and reliable. Playbooks themselves are extremely versatile and they're very easy to write. Once you start looking at examples, you can see that you can really do a lot. And there's you know, as with a lot of things, there's usually multiple ways to get to do what it is that you want. And so, you know, it's pretty easy to work with there. And the configuration, it's designed to be as human readable as possible and as easy to understand as possible. And you can basically, once you have set up a system, you've got an SSH key or a password. Highly recommend, if you're managing Linux servers, to use SSH keys as opposed to passwords. Nobody wants to use passwords and store passwords in configuration files and check them into source control. That is a bad idea. So use an SSH key. And as I mentioned, a very important facet to this is no agent is required for Ansible. Okay, I'm almost out of time, but I think we have a minute or so to answer any questions if there are any there.
Yeah, we have one big question. Can you integrate Terraform with Ansible for building out the virtual machines and configuring a SQL Server?
So the question is, you say, can you use Terraform with Ansible for building out machines for SQL Server? Is that?
And do they integrate together well?
Okay, so I'm not sure, but what I can do, I think you can, but I don't have any direct experience. But I do know some people who are familiar with work with both Terraform and Ansible. So if the person wants to contact me offline, I can either put them in touch with someone or just get them the answer. And actually, hold on, I should really have done this earlier. I'll just put my contact details here.
What we can also do is if you are wanting to pass any questions to him, please let me know in the questions whether I can pass your email address to him. We're not allowed to pass email addresses, but if you give me permission within the questions, then I can go ahead and pass it on to him. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm always open to that. I put my personal email here rather than my Microsoft email because Ansible is just, you know, a personal passion. It's not something I do currently professionally with Microsoft. But yeah, and also available on Twitter. If you have a very short question that needs a kind of, you know, quick response, Twitter is probably the best option. And then for something a little bit more detailed and long, probably go an email. But yeah, absolutely. Any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Okay. Is there any more questions or?
Yes. Is Ansible completely open source, or is it a licensed product that requires a license and subscription fee?
Ansible is completely open source. If you do want support, you can arrange a support contract with Ansible, and actually they're very open on the Red Hat website. They have all the pricing listed right there. I think once you get over maybe 100 servers, you probably have to contact them for custom pricing, but underneath 100 servers, pricing is all there on the website for support, but you can use it. It's completely open source, and I believe that they've also recently made Ansible Tower open source as well. So again, you'd only pay support, but if you can go ahead and use Ansible Tower for free. You could always use it as trial, but I believe now you can actually use the product entirely. That it is open source now. Do we have any more questions?
Where can we go to learn more about Ansible itself?
Okay, yeah. So go to the Red Hat website. They have I don't have it here, but you can just the documentation is very extensive and very, very good. I have high praise for the documentation here, and as I'm writing documentation for Microsoft Docs, I can say that this is one of my ideal template kind of documentation to use as a guideline. I think that documentation for Ansible is actually really excellent here. So yeah, docs.ansible.com has all the documentation for the latest and previous versions of Ansible, and you'll see that on the newer versions of Ansible, the amount of modules available is really, really extensive, and they've I'd say if you need something even more custom, there's plenty on Ansible Galaxy, but just be aware that they don't come with the same support level as core modules.
Hi, Brian.
Okay.
That looks like it.
Alrighty. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for the time, and hopefully this is a good introduction to Ansible for people, and encourage them to go out there and start looking at it. I think as a DBA, the ability to manage larger and larger amounts of servers is going to become really, really prevalent, and pretty much like a core skill of DBAs. And then of course compliance compliance work is pretty much par for the course now, and this can really, really help you out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully less scrambling as as the auditors arrive.
Brian, it was awesome meeting you, and thank you, because I know I definitely learned quite a few little things in there, so I'm gonna go check it out myself too.
Okay, excellent. Glad to hear it. And as I said, please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, feedback. I'm always open to it, and always happy to talk.
Wonderful. Everybody make sure that you guys are subscribed to our email so you can actually get a list of our upcoming meetings. You can also look online, dbafund.org, for our next sessions. This and others, but this presentation will be available within a day or two at dbafundtube.org. Again, that's dbafundtube.org, and you can see all of our past sessions out there as well. And lastly, thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time.